I never thought my sister would be the one to put me in the hospital. People talk about betrayal from lovers or friends, but they never warn you about what happens when it comes from blood. When the police arrived, I was on the kitchen floor, holding my side, gasping for air. My ribs felt like shattered glass grinding under my skin. Nora stood in the doorway, her face pale, but her voice sharp, yelling that I made her do it. She said I was being selfish, that I was keeping the family's money from her. But that money wasn't hers. It wasn't even mine, not really. It belonged to something much bigger. The flashing red and blue lights from the patrol car painted the walls of my farmhouse like a nightmare. I remember Officer Martinez kneeling beside me asking, "Who did this to you, ma'am?" I could barely speak, but I whispered, "My sister." Those two words burned my throat like acid. He looked at me with disbelief, the kind that comes when someone hears evil has worn a familiar face. I watched as they led Nora out in handcuffs, her voice echoing across the porch. "You'll regret this, Claire. You'll lose everything." Maybe once that threat would have broken me. But not that night. Because what Nora didn't know was that I had been documenting everything, the lies, the messages, the fake concern, the manipulation. And in 1 week, when she thought she had buried me under guilt and fear, she'd be the one standing before a judge. This wasn't just about broken ribs. This was about years of silence control and one woman finally saying enough. I used to think peace was permanent. That quiet morning's warm coffee and the sound of wind through the cornfield would always be mine. Before everything fell apart, my life was small but whole. I woke every morning before sunrise, brewed my coffee black, and watched the mist roll across the fields that used to be my husband David's pride. After his accident, I kept the farm running as best I could until it became too much. Selling it wasn't greed. It was survival. The buyer had offered $260,000, enough to pay off debts and build the small learning center David and I had dreamed about for rural kids. I told no one except my lawyer. But in a town like ours, secrets spread like wildfire. When Nora found out, she arrived uninvited one Saturday afternoon. She came in heels and perfume that didn't belong on farmland, carrying a bottle of Merlot and that familiar smirk that could slice through steel. "So baby sister finally made a smart move," she said, glancing at the freshly signed sale documents on my counter. I offered her coffee instead of wine. "It wasn't smart," I replied softly. "It was necessary." She laughed that cold little laugh that always meant danger. "You really think you can handle that kind of money? You'll lose it within a month. Let me help. I'm the one who understands business." I looked at her, trying to read whether she cared or simply calculated. Nora had always been that way, helping only when it served her image. I told her I already had plans for the money, but I could see her eyes darken. "Plans," she repeated, voice dripping with mockery. "Don't forget who saved you after Dad died. You owe me." I didn't answer. I didn't owe her anything except silence. That night, as I washed the dishes, I could still smell her perfume in my kitchen, sharp floral and poisonous. It lingered like a warning, whispering that peace was about to leave this house for good. 2 days after that uneasy visit, Nora called me. Her tone was syrupy sweet, the kind she used when she wanted something but hadn't decided how to manipulate me into giving it yet. "Claire, I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said regarding your plans. Maybe we could talk about them together, make sure you're doing what's best for everyone." I stared at my phone for a long moment before answering. "Best for everyone, or best for you?" I asked quietly. There was a pause, then her voice hardened. "Don't start with that attitude. You've always been so ungrateful. I'm trying to look out for you." I almost laughed. Nora had never looked out for anyone but herself. Still, I agreed to meet her in town for coffee. Maybe a part of me wanted to believe she'd changed. At the cafe, she was already seated when I arrived, perfectly put together in a navy blazer, gold jewelry glinting under the morning light. She looked like she'd stepped out of someone else's life. "Claire," she said, smiling too wide, "you look tired. The farm life catching up to you." "The farm's gone," I reminded her. "Sold." "Right," she said, waving her manicured hand. "And what are you going to do with all that money sitting in your account? You can't just let it rot there." "I could help you invest." I told her I didn't need help. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Listen, I know you're not good with numbers. I remember how David used to handle everything. You're not used to money, real money. That's when I felt it, a flicker of something sharp in her tone. Pity. Or maybe contempt. Nora. I've managed everything since David died, I said firmly. I don't need you to manage me. Her smile vanished. Claire, don't be stupid. You've always been naive. If you don't handle it right, you'll lose everything. And when that happens, don't come crying to me. The words hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I saw the sister I grew up with, the one who had comforted me after our mother left, the one who held my hand at Dad's funeral. But that girl was long gone. The woman across from me had turned compassion into a weapon. I'll take my chances, I said, standing. She didn't stop me, but as I walked out of the cafe, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Nora was watching me, her eyes narrowed, calculating. That's when I knew this wasn't over. When I got home, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You'll regret keeping secrets from family. My blood ran cold. I knew that style of threat. It was Nora's language sweetness on the surface, venom underneath. The first crack had formed, and what followed would destroy everything. The next Sunday afternoon, Nora showed up at my house without calling. I saw her car through the kitchen window, that white Lexus she'd bought after her second divorce, shining like arrogance itself. I almost didn't open the door, but I knew she'd just pound on it until the neighbors noticed. I'm busy, Nora, I said, as soon as I opened it. You don't look busy, she replied, eyes scanning my small, tidy kitchen like it was beneath her. We need to talk. It's about Dad's inheritance and the farm money. My stomach tightened. There's nothing to discuss. The property was mine legally and I sold it. End of story. She stepped inside anyway, brushing past me. Don't be dramatic, Claire. You know that farm was part of our family legacy. Dad wanted it shared between us. I crossed my arms. Dad also wanted us to take care of each other, but you vanished the minute he was buried. Her expression hardened. That's not fair. I had a career, responsibilities, bills. I couldn't stay here rotting away with you. No, I said, my voice calm but cold. You just didn't want to get your hands dirty. She slammed her purse on the counter. You're unbelievable. I'm trying to help you and you're making me out to be the villain. You're not helping, I said. You're circling. Her jaw tightened and she took a slow step toward me. You know, Claire, you've always had this martyr complex, pretending you're the innocent one while everyone else is out to get you. But let me tell you something, money changes people, and if you're not careful, it'll ruin you. I met her gaze. Or maybe it already ruined you. That's when the mask slipped. Nora's face contorted with anger and her voice dropped an octave. Don't test me, Claire. You think you can just walk away with everything while I'm drowning in debt? I deserve my share. You deserve nothing, I said quietly. You didn't plant a single seed, didn't pay a single bill, didn't shed a single tear when the roof leaked and the crops failed. That farm was my life, not yours. She moved so fast I didn't see it coming. Her hand slammed against the table, rattling a glass. You always think you're better than me. Dad loved you more. David left everything to you, and now you're sitting on all that money while I'm barely surviving. Because you made your choices, I said, my voice shaking but steady. And I made mine. Her breath came in short bursts, fury rising in her eyes. You'll regret this, she hissed. You don't cross family and walk away clean. She turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. I stood there, hands trembling, the air vibrating with leftover rage. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just angry, she was dangerous. That night, I found muddy footprints near my back porch and the faint smell of Nora's perfume in the air, like lilies mixed with gasoline. When I checked the shed, the door was slightly ajar. Inside, the lockbox that held my sale documents had been forced open. The papers were still there, but something told me this was just the beginning. Nora wasn't done, and the next time she came, she wouldn't just use words. The following days were quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It was the kind of silence that hums beneath your skin, waiting to explode. I changed the locks on my doors, moved the money to a secure account, and left my important documents at my lawyer's office. I told myself it was just precaution, but deep down I knew I was preparing for war. On Thursday afternoon, I was sweeping the porch when I heard the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. My stomach dropped before I even turned around. Nora's car again. This time, she didn't come alone. Her boyfriend Mark, a tall, rough-looking man with eyes that never smiled, stepped out with her. He looked around the property like he was already calculating its worth. "What are you doing here, Nora?" I asked, gripping the broom handle tighter than I should. "We're here to make things right," she said sweetly, like we were about to discuss the weather. "You've had time to think, and I assume you realized it's better for everyone if we handle the money together. There's nothing to handle. Leave both of you." Mark chuckled under his breath. "You shouldn't talk to your sister that way," he said, stepping closer. "We just want what's fair." "Fair," I repeated. "Fair is me working that land while you partied your way through 2 failed marriages." Nora's smile vanished. "You're such a self-righteous little saint," she snapped. "You think you're better because you stayed behind and played farmer while the rest of us lived real lives. But you're just bitter and jealous of what I shot back. Your debt, your broken promises, your endless chaos." Her face flushed crimson. "You don't get to talk to me like that, Claire." "Then stop coming here," I said, pointing toward the gate. "You're trespassing. You think a piece of paper makes this yours?" She spat, stepping closer. "That farm was Dad's dream, his legacy. You stole it from me." "Dad left it to both of us," I reminded her, "but you signed it away for $5,000 when you needed bail money for your ex." Mark's smirk disappeared, replaced by something colder. "You should watch your mouth, lady." "Get off my property," I said again, voice shaking but strong. "Now!" Nora's hands were trembling. I could see the rage swelling in her chest like something feral. "You know what she said?" Voice rising. "You've always been a coward. You hide behind your good girl act, but deep down, you're just a selfish, lonely woman who'll die surrounded by chickens and dust." I turned to walk back into the house, refusing to let her bait me. That's when she grabbed my arm. Hard. "Don't walk away from me," she screamed. "You're going to listen." I yanked free, and for a split second I saw something break in her eyes, like she'd decided there was no line she wouldn't cross anymore. Before I could react, her hand shot out again, this time shoving me backward into the porch railing. Pain shot through my ribs, but I caught myself before falling. "Nora, stop," I gasped. "You're hurting me. You did this to yourself," she shouted, her voice trembling with fury. Mark stood frozen for a moment, then muttered, "Nora." "Let's go," but she didn't move. Her eyes were locked on me, wild and glassy. "You think you can humiliate me? You think you can take everything from me?" Then she shoved me again harder. My back hit the railing, then the ground. A sharp crack ripped through my side, stealing my breath. For a moment, all I could hear was ringing. Nora's face hovered above me, white with shock. "Oh, my God! Claire," she stammered. You fell." I tried to speak, but pain seared through my chest like fire. Mark pulled her away. "We need to get out of here. Now." "She's fine," Nora hissed, but her voice shook. "She's fine." Their car roared down the gravel road, leaving me gasping in the dirt, clutching my ribs. Through the blur of pain, I whispered to no one. Not this time. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling, and dialed 911. What do you want? When the ambulance arrived, the siren cut through the countryside silence like a blade. 2 paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher, their hands professional but gentle as they tried not to touch the side that burned like molten iron. Every bump on the road felt like punishment. I kept hearing Nora's voice in my head. You did this to yourself, and wondering when she had stopped being my sister and become my enemy. At the hospital, the bright lights made everything surreal. A doctor pressed on my ribs, and I nearly screamed. 2 fractures, possibly 3, he said grimly. You're lucky nothing punctured your lung. Lucky. That word almost made me laugh. My luck was being assaulted by my own blood and left to bleed in the dirt. Officer Martinez arrived an hour later. He was the same man who had responded to my call months ago when thieves tried to break into nearby farms. His eyes softened when he saw me lying there, pale and bandaged. "Ms. Bennett," he said, pulling out his notepad. "Can you tell me what happened?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to protect Nora. The other part, the one that had been silenced for years, knew this was my only chance to break free. "It was my sister," I whispered. "Nora Hale." She pushed me, twice. The second time I fell and heard something crack. His pen froze mid-stroke. "Your sister did this to you." "Yes, and her boyfriend was with her. His name's Mark Delaney. They came to demand money from the farm sale. I told him everything from the threats to the uninvited visits to the forced entry attempt." By the time I finished, the officer's expression had hardened into something cold and professional. "We'll take it from here, ma'am. You did the right thing calling us." But as he left, I saw the doubt flicker in his eyes, the kind of doubt small-town officers have when family is involved. In this place, people always sided with blood. I lay there that night staring at the ceiling, thinking about how long I had let Nora twist my life into something ugly. Growing up, she had been the golden one, beautiful, clever, adored by our parents, while I was the quiet shadow who cleaned up her messes. Even after Dad died, I still believed she'd changed, that she'd come home one day with remorse instead of greed. But people like Nora don't change. They only sharpen. The next morning, Grace came to visit me. She was my neighbor and my closest friend, a widow who knew what pain looked like. When she saw the bruises on my ribs, her hands shook. "Claire," she whispered, "you can't keep protecting her. You have to press charges." "She's my sister," I said weakly. Was Grace corrected, her voice firm. "Sisters don't break ribs for money." The words landed like truth finally spoken out loud. The nurse helped me sit up to sign medical forms, and as I did, I made a decision. "I'm going to the police station tomorrow," I said. Grace nodded, her eyes glistening with relief. "Good. You need to take your power back." That night, I slept for the first time in days, not because I felt safe, but because I finally knew what I was going to do. Somewhere out there, Nora thought I was broken, beaten, and too afraid to fight back. But she didn't know me anymore. She didn't know that the quiet ones, when pushed far enough, stop being victims. They become something else entirely. The morning I went to the sheriff's office, the air was heavy and gray, the kind that makes the world feel muted. I walked slowly, each breath reminding me of the cracks in my ribs, but I refused to let the pain stop me. Officer Martinez met me at the door and led me into a small interview room that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "we've spoken to your neighbors and a few folks in town. They confirm seeing your sister's car near your property several times over the last week." I nodded. She never came to visit me before the sale. Now she shows up every other day. "We also located the man you mentioned, Mark Delaney. He's got a record. Assault, fraud, even a restraining order from his ex-wife." My stomach twisted. So she knew exactly who she was bringing into my life. Martinez sighed. "People like that see opportunity wherever they can find it. But we'll need to move carefully. Family cases are messy. They tend to get emotional." "Emotional." I repeated, my voice trembling. She broke my ribs. His eyes softened, but his tone stayed steady. "I know, ma'am, which is why we're going to treat this seriously. You've already filed the assault report, but we'll need your full statement and permission to issue a restraining order." I signed everything without hesitation. When I left the station, Grace was waiting for me outside in her old blue pickup. "Did you tell them everything?" she asked. "Everything I said. Now it's their move. But small towns have long memories and short tempers. Within 2 days, I started getting looks at the grocery store, whispers. One woman stopped me near the canned goods aisle and said, "I heard you called the cops on your own sister. Families fight honey, but dragging police into it? That's cold." I walked away without answering, but inside, shame mixed with fury. Nora had started spinning her version already. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, her voice poured through the line like poison. "You think calling the cops will make you safe? You just made it worse." "You assaulted me," I said quietly. "You could have killed me." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she hissed. "You slipped. You've always been clumsy. Maybe that's what you should tell them before you embarrass yourself in court." My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Nora." "Stay away from me," I said. "That's not a request. It's a warning." She laughed, a hollow sound that scraped at my nerves. "You don't get to warn me, little sister. You might have the law on your side, but I have something stronger, people who believe me." Then she hung up. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of shadow felt like her ghost. The next morning, I found a single red lily left on my porch, her signature scent made flesh. No note, just the flower. Grace called the sheriff immediately, but there was nothing they could do without proof of trespassing. "We'll keep an eye on your property," Martinez said, "but you might want to consider staying somewhere else for a few days." I looked out at the land I'd worked for years, the place where David's ashes rested under the oak tree, and I knew I wasn't leaving. This was my home. That night, I locked every door and sat by the window with a flashlight and the phone beside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't praying for peace. I was waiting for the storm to come back, and deep down, I hoped it would. 2 nights later, the storm I had been waiting for arrived. It was almost midnight when the motion light outside my barn flicked on. My heart jumped. I turned off the lamp beside my bed and listened. At first, only wind. Then the soft crunch of gravel, slow, deliberate footsteps. I grabbed the phone and whispered, "Grace, it's happening. Someone's here." Her voice came back trembling. "Claire, lock yourself in the room. I'm calling the police." But I didn't hang up. I moved quietly to the window and pulled the curtain just enough to see. Headlights glowed faintly from the edge of my property. A white Lexus, Nora's car. My blood ran cold. I saw her silhouette get out, then another, the unmistakable bulk of Mark. They were carrying something, a crowbar. My pulse pounded in my ears. "They're trying to get in," I whispered to Grace. "Stay on the line," she said. "The sheriff's on his way." But I couldn't wait. Something inside me snapped. Weeks of fear turned into fire. I slipped into my boots, grabbed David's old hunting flashlight, and stepped outside through the kitchen door, leaving the light off. The night air was thick and electric. The two figures were by the barn, now whispering. I crept closer. Every step slow, deliberate. Mark's voice cut through the dark. "You sure she's not here?" Nora hissed back. "She's hiding like the coward she's always been." "We'll find that money tonight. The safe's inside the house, not here," Mark grunted. "We break in, grab the documents, and go. No one gets hurt if she doesn't show up." But I was already there. My flashlight beam snapped on, blinding them. "Step away from my barn," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Nora froze. "Claire." "Jesus, you scared us." "Don't move," I warned. "Police are on their way." Mark cursed under his breath, shielding his eyes. "You called the cops again. You're insane. You came to my home in the middle of the night with tools," I said, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. "That's breaking and entering." Nora's mask cracked. "You don't understand. We just wanted to talk with a crowbar," I snapped. The air went dead still. Then Mark lunged. I barely had time to swing the flashlight before it connected with his shoulder. He staggered back, cursing. Nora screamed, "Stop it! Don't hurt him," as if she wasn't the one trespassing. I backed toward the porch, every breath like knives in my chest. The red and blue lights appeared just as Mark straightened, rage twisting his face. The siren's wail cut through the chaos, and I'd never heard anything so beautiful. 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop. Officers flooded the yard, guns-drawn voices booming through the dark, hands where we can see them. Mark dropped the crowbar, muttering something under his breath. Nora threw up her hands, eyes wide with false innocence. "It's a misunderstanding. She's my sister." But I was done protecting her. "No," I said loudly. "She's my attacker, and she's here to finish what she started." The officers separated us, one guiding me toward the house, while another handcuffed Mark. Nora tried to reach for me, shouting, "Claire, please, you're twisting everything. We're family." I turned back once, meeting her gaze. "No, Nora. Family doesn't do this." When the police car doors slammed, the night went quiet again, except for the hum of adrenaline in my blood. Officer Martinez stood beside me on the porch, scribbling notes. "You sure you're okay, ma'am? I'm done being scared," I said. He nodded slowly. "You might have just saved yourself from something worse tonight." But as they drove Nora and Mark away, I knew this wasn't the end. People like my sister don't surrender easily. They wait, they plot, and when they lose power, they find new ways to strike back. The following morning, the world felt strangely still, as if the land itself was holding its breath. My house was surrounded by yellow police tape muddy boot prints marking where the officers had walked. The sun cut through the clouds, pale and cold, and for the first time in months, I felt no fear, only exhaustion. Grace showed up with coffee and a determined look in her eyes. "They're charging both of them," she said. "Breaking and entering, attempted assault trespassing." "You did the right thing, Claire." I wanted to believe that, but a part of me still mourned not for Nora, but for what she could have been. My phone buzzed a call from Officer Martinez. "Ms. Bennett, we've just gotten a statement from your sister. She's claiming she came to retrieve property that rightfully belonged to her. She says you've been unstable since your husband's death and that she was trying to intervene." I laughed bitterly. Of course she did. She's gaslighting the police now. "We're aware," he said calmly. "We've gathered enough witness statements and physical evidence to contradict her story. But be prepared. This might go to court. I'm not backing down," I told him. After I hung up, Grace handed me a folder. "You'll need this," she said. Inside were photographs, my bruises, the damaged railing, the smashed door to my barn. Proof. Tangible truth. When the trial began 3 weeks later, half the town showed up drawn by the spectacle. Nora entered the courtroom in a cream blazer, her hair perfectly curled, every inch the wronged victim. She even had tears in her eyes. I sat across from her in a plain navy dress, ribs still aching beneath my blouse, and reminded myself to breathe. The prosecutor began with the 911 call, my voice trembling through the speakers as I said, "My sister, she attacked me." Then came Grace's testimony, calm and unwavering. I saw the bruises. I saw the fear, and I saw the flower she left on that porch, like a warning. Nora's lawyer objected, claiming emotional bias, but the judge allowed it. Then they called me. My palms were damp as I took the stand. Nora's eyes drilled into mine, a silent dare. "Ms. Bennett," the prosecutor said gently, "can you describe what happened the night of the incident?" I told them everything, the manipulation, the threats, the shove, that broke my ribs the night she returned with Mark and a crowbar. My voice only shook once when I said I kept forgiving her because she was my sister. But love doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. When Nora's lawyer cross-examined me, his tone dripped condescension. "Ms. Bennett, isn't it true that you've been under emotional distress since your husband's death, that perhaps you misinterpreted your sister's concern?" I stared straight at him. "If concern means showing up drunk, breaking into my home, and threatening my life, then yes, I misinterpreted it." The courtroom murmured. Even the judge's gavel couldn't quiet it completely. Then, unexpectedly, Mark's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "my client wishes to change his plea." Gasps rippled through the room. Mark glanced at me, then at Nora. "She told me to do it," he said hoarsely. "Said her sister was hiding money and she needed help getting what was hers." I didn't know she'd go that far. Nora's composure shattered. "You liar!" she screamed, lunging toward him before 2 officers restrained her. The judge's voice boomed through the chaos. "Enough, Mrs. Hale. You will remain silent or be removed from this courtroom." In that moment, the entire room saw her for what she was: not a victim, but a predator, cornered by her own lies. When the verdict was read 2 days later, my knees nearly gave out. Guilty. On all counts. Nora's face went pale as they led her away in cuffs. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was the weight of finality. The sister I once loved was gone forever. After the verdict, I expected relief to come like sunlight after a storm. But instead, the air around me grew heavier. The newspapers picked up the story, "Local woman convicted for assaulting sister over inheritance." My phone rang, non-stop reporters pretending to care. Neighbors pretending to understand. I ignored them all. I didn't need their pity or curiosity. What I needed was quiet. Nora was sentenced to 4 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 2, while Mark received 6 months for cooperating with the prosecution. When the judge read the sentence, Nora didn't cry. She just stared at me, her eyes burning with something deeper than anger, hatred mixed with disbelief, as though she still couldn't accept that I had won. Grace came with me to the parking lot afterward, her arm steadying mine. "It's over," she whispered. "You're free now." But freedom didn't feel clean. That night, I sat on my porch, bandages still tight around my ribs, staring at the land I'd almost lost. The soil smelled damp from the morning rain. David's oak tree rustled softly, and for the first time in years, I spoke out loud to the empty air. I did it, David. I finally stopped letting her hurt me. The words cracked something open inside me. I cried not the broken kind, but the kind that rinses away poison. A week later, Officer Martinez stopped by with final paperwork. "Ms. Bennett, he said you'll be receiving restitution payments from Nora's assets once the state finalizes the process. It's not much, but it's part of her sentence." I nodded, though money was the last thing on my mind. "What happens to her now?" "She's been transferred to the Women's Correctional Facility upstate. She'll have mandatory counseling. Maybe she'll change." I gave a small, tired smile. "Maybe. But I won't wait around to find out." After he left, I began cleaning out the farmhouse. Nora's perfume still clung to the curtains in faint, haunting traces. I tore them down and replaced them with new ones, white linen, crisp and clean. Grace helped me repaint the porch railings where I had fallen. Every brushstroke felt like reclaiming something she'd tried to take. By the time summer rolled in, the house no longer looked like a place of pain. It looked like mine again. But peace doesn't erase scars. Some nights I'd wake to the echo of her scream, "You'll regret this." Claire, and my chest would tighten until I reminded myself she couldn't touch me anymore. One afternoon, I received a letter from the prison. The handwriting was unmistakable. For a long time, I stared at the envelope, then opened it with shaking hands. "Claire," it began, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but you need to know I never meant to hurt you that badly. I just wanted what I thought I deserved. When I saw you living the life I lost, something inside me snapped. Maybe prison is where I belong. Maybe I needed walls to finally see what I'd become. Tell Grace I'm sorry for what she saw. Tell yourself that one day I'll make it right." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer where I kept old family photos. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was something, an acknowledgement that the monster who broke my ribs was still somewhere beneath it all, my sister. That night, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, I whispered, "I hope you find peace, Nora," because I already had. The months after the trial moved quietly like a town after the circus has left. I still woke up before dawn, still made my coffee black and bitter, but it tasted different now, less like routine, more like rebirth. Grace and I started fixing the old barn together. She joked that it was therapy with a hammer, and she wasn't wrong. Every nail I drove into the wood was like sealing shut one of the fractures Nora had left in my life. The first frost came early that year, painting the fields silver. I used some of the restitution money to repair the roof, then decided to turn the empty storage room into a small studio, a space for community classes in memory of David. It was something we'd dreamed of for years, and I finally had the strength to make it real. One afternoon, while I was hanging photos of the farm's earlier days, Grace came in holding her tablet. "Claire," she said, "you might want to see this." On the local news page was a headline, "Inmate Launches Restorative Project for Victims of Family Violence." The photo showed Nora in a gray jumpsuit sitting at a folding table, head bowed over a stack of letters. "They're having inmates write apologies to survivors," Grace said softly. Apparently, she volunteered. I stared at the image for a long time. "She looks different." "People can change," Grace said, "but that doesn't mean you have to let them back in." I nodded. I don't want her back in my life. I just want to know that she's finally facing herself. That night, I found myself standing under the oak tree again. The wind was sharp cold enough to sting, and I whispered to the soil where David's ashes rested, "I think I'm ready to start over." Over the next few weeks, I launched the Bennett Foundation in partnership with the local women's shelter. It offered workshops on financial independence, self-defense, and recovery from family abuse. The first class was small, just 5 women, but when I told my story, they listened in silence. One woman, her arm still bruised from her husband's grip, whispered afterward, "I thought I was alone." I told her, "You're not. None of us are." That sentence felt like freedom. By spring, the program had grown. Local papers began writing about the farm turned foundation. "From Violence to Victory," one headline read. The words made me smile. One afternoon, I received another letter, this time from Nora's counselor. She wanted permission for Nora to attend a restorative justice session with me before her parole hearing. I sat on the porch for hours, turning the envelope over in my hands. Part of me wanted to refuse to keep her locked away in the past, but another part, the part that had survived everything, knew that healing wasn't about erasing the wound, it was about proving it no longer controlled you. So I agreed. 2 weeks later, they brought her to the courthouse meeting room. She was thinner, older somehow, the arrogance gone from her eyes. When she sat across from me, her hands trembled. "Claire," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I can't take back what I did. I don't even recognize the woman who hurt you, but I think about it every night. I broke your bones, but you broke my denial. Thank you for making me face who I am." Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time, I believed they were real. I didn't reach for her hand, but I said softly, "I hope you use the rest of your life to make amends. Not to me, but to yourself." When she was led away, I didn't feel anger anymore, just release. Outside, the spring air smelled like rain and hope. For the first time in years, I felt light. A full year after the night my sister broke my ribs, the scars had faded, but the story remained carved into me like lines on wood, visible only when the light hit at the right angle. Life on the farm had found a rhythm again. The Bennett Foundation had expanded now, working with 3 counties to support women escaping toxic families or violent relationships. Some days I still woke with aches in my chest, but they were no longer from pain. They were reminders that I had survived something meant to destroy me. One warm April morning, I was standing in front of a group of high school students who had come to tour the property and learn about the program. I told them about inheritance manipulation and the quiet ways control can disguise itself as love. They listened with wide eyes. "Do you still talk to your sister?" a girl in the front row asked. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Not anymore," I said. "But I don't hate her. Hatred ties you to the very thing you're trying to escape. I forgave her not because she deserved it, but because I did." After they left, I sat on the porch with Grace. She'd become my anchor through it all. "You've turned this place into something good," she said, looking out over the restored fields. "Do you ever think about selling it again?" I smiled faintly. "No. This land isn't just soil anymore. It's proof that what's broken can grow again." She squeezed my hand. "David would be proud." "I hope so," I said. "I think he'd laugh at how stubborn I've become." A few days later, a letter arrived from the parole board. Nora had been released early for good behavior and completion of rehabilitation programs. There was no return address, just a note written in her precise handwriting. "Claire, I understand if you never want to see me again. I'm moving to Oregon to work at a rehabilitation center. I'm trying to make something of what's left of me. You taught me that pain can either rot you or rebuild you. I'm finally choosing the second." I sat there for a long time after reading it. Grace found me on the porch again. "Is that from her?" she asked. "Yes. Are you okay?" I nodded. For the first time, I think I am. That evening, I walked to the oak tree where David's ashes rested and placed the letter beneath one of its roots. "You were right," I whispered to the quiet. "Love isn't about blood. It's about who stands beside you when the world turns cruel." The air smelled of rain and lilacs, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. Weeks later, I hosted an event at the foundation to mark its first anniversary. The room filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and women who had survived their own storms. On the wall behind me hung a plaque, for every woman who was told she couldn't fight back. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and looked at their faces, some bruised, some scarred, all brave. 1 year ago I began, I thought my story ended in violence. I thought pain had the final word, but what I've learned is this healing isn't quiet and justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply standing up and saying, "Enough." Sometimes it's walking away and never looking back. The crowd was silent, eyes glistening. You can survive betrayal. You can survive abuse. You can survive even the people who were supposed to love you, because survival isn't just staying alive, it's choosing to live again. When the applause came, it felt like thunder rolling through my bones, shaking loose the last pieces of fear still hiding inside me. Later, as the lights dimmed and the guests left, I stood alone by the window, watching fireflies bloom across the dark fields. The world was wide and open again. I thought about Nora somewhere far away, maybe looking at the same stars, maybe still trying to rebuild. And for once, that thought didn't hurt. It just was. My ribs no longer ached when I breathed deeply. My hands no longer shook when I remembered her face. I had turned pain into purpose, fear into foundation. My name is Claire Bennett. I am 42 years old, and I learned that sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about peace.